Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca. You may know me as Soft Suns on Tumblr, where I reblog pretty pictures and talk a lot about BBC Sherlock, which hey, look what I'm doing right now. As you probably read on the title of this video, today I'm going to be talking to you about TJLC. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, hello! Welcome to hell. For people both old and new to TJLC, this video series is intended to be a compilation of a lot of the theories and explanations surrounding Johnlock in one easy to find and share place. So I hope you find it helpful and enjoyable. As a quick refresher, TJLC stands for the Johnlock Conspiracy, which is a silly name created by these wonderful people in early 2014 for the belief that the creators of BBC Sherlock intend for Johnlock, or a romantic relationship between John and Sherlock, to happen on the show. But Rebecca, I hear you ask, why would you think that? What proof could you possibly have? Or at least I hope that's what you asked, instead of leaving some kind of lol, gays are dumb comment down below. And if you did, I mean, seriously, bro, it's 2016. Come on. But back to your question. There are plenty of reasons just inside of the show that would lead someone to believe Johnlock will happen, and trust me, I'll be getting into those in great depth in the weeks to come. But in this first video, I'm going to stick to building some background context for this series, in particular the circumstances leading to this particular adaptation, and how these things alone make a pretty good case for TJLC being the most likely outcome. The main obstacle to overcome here is that most people come into the show assuming that it's straight, and that makes sense because we live in a society that teaches us that everyone is straight until proven otherwise, and thinking differently than that is rude or offensive, but it isn't, and a lot opens up when you overcome that kind of thinking, which can admittedly be difficult to do. The other issue here is that Sherlock Holmes is pretty deeply embedded in our culture, and because of this we think we know him pretty well. So if you were gay, we'd already know all about that, right? Well, no. Let's quickly travel back to the 1800s when the Sherlock Holmes stories were first being published. Now, if you think that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, living in the Victorian age, could have just written a gay character if that's what he wanted to do, you're wrong. Homosexuality was actually a crime at the time, as in you could go to jail and face other consequences if you were proven to be gay. Famously, Oscar Wilde was convicted of indecency in 1895. His novel The Picture of Dorian Gray was actually used against him in court to show him as being guilty of a certain tendency. So you can see how writing an openly gay character would have gotten Doyle into some trouble, even if he was open to the idea. I'd also like to add that I'm not bringing up this connection out of the blue. Oscar Wilde and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle were friends. In a conversation between the two, they actually both agreed to write stories, and Oscar Wilde ended up writing the now infamous Picture of Dorian Gray, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle ended up writing what would become A Study in Scarlet, which, if you don't know, is the first Sherlock Holmes story. And despite the fact that Doyle couldn't write an openly gay character without getting in trouble, the stories are loaded with subtext around the relationship between Holmes and Watson. I've provided a link below to a master post of readings involving queer theory in the original canon if that's something you're interested in, but this really isn't my area of speciality, so I'm going to stick to highlighting a few very memorable quotes from the original canon, including, "Good morning, madam," said Holmes cheerily. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. This is my intimate friend and associate, John Watson, before whom you may speak as freely as myself." "I shall never do that," I answered. "You have brought detection as near as an exact science as it will ever be brought in this world." My companion flushed up with pleasure at my words, and the earnest way in which I uttered them. I had already observed that he was as sensitive to flattery on the score of his art as any girl could be of her beauty. Holmes was for the moment as startled as I. His hand closed like a vice upon my wrist in his agitation. Then he broke into a low laugh and put his lips to my ear. Or that time Holmes told Watson he wished they could fly out the window, hand in hand, hover over this great city, gently remove the roofs, and peep in at the queer things which are going on, the strange coincidences. And who could forget the crowning moment? Then my friend's wiry arms were round me, and he was leading me to a chair. "You're not hurt, Watson. For God's sake, say you are not hurt." It was worth a wound. It was worth many wounds, to know the depth of loyalty and love which lay beneath the cold mask. The clear, hard eyes were dimmed for a moment, and the firm lips were shaking. For the one and only time, I caught a glimpse of a great heart as well as a great brain. All my years of humble but single-minded service culminated in that moment of revelation. "It's nothing, Holmes. It's a mere scratch." He had ripped up my trousers with his pocket knife. "You are right," he cried in an immense sigh of relief. "It is quite superficial." His face was set like flint as he glared at our prisoner, who was sitting up with a dazed face. "By the Lord, it is well for you. If you had killed Watson, you would not have gotten out of this room alive." That last moment from The Adventure of the Three Gatiss has been cited by both Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat, the creators and writers of Sherlock, as being one of their favorite moments of the entire original canon. Since we're talking about things both Mark and Stephen enjoy, I might as well talk about one of their favorite adaptations, The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. And it kind of kills two birds with one stone, since at this point you may be asking yourself, well, that was the Victorian era. He's been around for nearly 100 years now and no one else has tried to make a gay Holmes. And once again, you'd be wrong. The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, or T-Plosh, as it is colloquially known, was released in 1970 and was directed by Billy Wilder. The film flirts with the idea of an openly gay Holmes, including a gay Russian ballet scene where Holmes himself tells a woman that he and Watson have been together for 5 very happy years. Watson gets extremely angry when he finds out about this, which is definitely the worst thing about this version, but in response to Watson's homophobia, Holmes tells him that he's being presumptuous in assuming that there have been women in his life. But the film never confirms anything outright, and Billy Wilder has expressed his regrets on not going all the way with the movie. In an interview given years after the film's release, Billy Wilder said the following:
"I should have been more daring with The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, but unfortunately the son of Conan Doyle was there. I wanted to make Holmes a homosexual. That's why he is on dope. Look, we have been freed now from the Breen office or the Johnson office or that stupid thing. In many respects it's terrifying, because now any idiot and any pornographer can do anything. But for the ones who are a little bit discriminating, who do it delicately, a grand new thing is opened. But that was after I made Private Life. The saddest thing about the film is that it was a waste of 1.5 years of my life. When you get to be my age, you say, shit, if I just had the time back that I wasted on pictures that were failures. But I'm not ashamed of it. There are many pictures I wish I could scratch out, but this one I'm not ashamed of."
Quickly, the Breen office and the Johnson office are in reference to the motion picture code in place at the time, which forbade any representation of homosexuality in film. And like I said, both Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat have said this film was a huge inspiration for them. Now, in 2009, just before BBC Sherlock was commissioned, BBC actually conducted extensive research to see how their audience felt about LGBT representation in their programming. The results of this study were released to the public in 2010 and brought to light in the Sherlock fandom in 2014 by Tumblr user SkullsNT. I've linked to Scully's master post of the research, as well as an analysis written by Tumblr user Loudest Subtext in Television, both on screen and down below, in case you're interested in learning more, but I'll be running through the key points of the study here. The study didn't include questions about trans representation, so if you're wondering why I keep saying LGB instead of LGBT, that's why. Firstly, according to the study, LGBT people feel very strongly about the importance, amount, and quality of portrayal of LGBT people. The language and tone of this programming is particularly important to LGBT audiences, and they expect homophobia to be challenged. Audiences also said they wanted more LGBT representation, specifically representation which reflects lesbian women and bisexual people. Sorry, I think I got something stuck in my throat there. It is also important that these characters are authentic and non-stereotypical. The BBC acknowledged that there was a small minority of people uncomfortable with the representation of LGBT people, but they also admitted that it is their responsibility to expose these people to more LGBT representation. According to their research, doing so creates more acceptance. There are a variety of ways that the media affects the attitudes that people have towards those who are perhaps different from themselves. For example, some people may not see anyone who happens to be lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and the only time they may see or hear about them could be through broadcast media. The BBC also recognized the importance of a combination of incidental and overt representation, as well as more landmark representation, which is very important. Again, for clarification, incidental representation includes characters and stories with people who just happen to be gay, and it isn't really the center point of the story. Overt portrayal is where the characters are LGB, and that is the center focus of the narrative. And landmark LGB content is, quote, content which pushes boundaries in terms of the portrayal of LGB people. It can be felt to belong to LGBT communities and become culturally iconic. The BBC specifically stated in these reports that they want to air more landmark and water cooler content that becomes culturally iconic.
There is also a recognition amongst LGBT respondents that water cooler moments remain an important part of LGBT portrayal if handled sensitively and given sufficient depth and time to unfold. Sound familiar?
The study also found that LGBT people are sick and tired of tragic endings, and that landmark content includes visuals of LGBT intimacy, i.e. kissing, hand-holding, etc. Both of these indicate that the BBC doesn't really want to have shows that just hint at the idea of a romance, or that they would include the romance only to have it end badly. Finally, the BBC stated its intent to work with LGBT writers to create better, more authentic LGBT content. And just look at who one of the main writers of BBC Sherlock is. If it isn't Mark Gatiss, outspoken gay man and LGBT activist, and who's recently been shown doing this for a promo video on his writing process.
I've mostly been writing Sherlock and Doctor Who for the last few years.
Mark Gatiss has also stated that the BBC has never kept him from doing something that he wanted to do. So let's talk more about the creators of BBC Sherlock. Both Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat are self-declared fanboys of the original Holmes canon. And like I said earlier, T-Plosh is one of their favorite adaptations. Mark went so far as to call it the film that changed his life, and he makes the reason pretty clear in an article he wrote in 2010.
There's an amazing scene where, to get out of a situation where a Russian ballerina wants Sherlock to father her child, he claims Watson and he are gay. Watson is outraged and, when he calms down, speaks of the women all over the world who could attest to his sexuality. He says to Sherlock, "You do too, don't you?" Holmes is silent, and Watson says, "Am I being presumptuous? There have been women, haven't there?" Holmes says, "The answer is yes. You are being presumptuous." Sensational.
There's also the notable interview where Mark said,
"I think when the day comes that you have a big detective show where the first half hour was this man at work and he's a maverick and all the usual things, and then when we went home and his boyfriend says, 'Are you all right? It was just a thing,' then something genuinely changed."
and before you get the idea that this is something that just Mark is interested in,
What's been your biggest disagreement? Oh no, we don't. Eerily, we were asked this years ago. We haven't disagreed ever on Sherlock.
not only that, but Moffat got tired of waiting to write canon Johnlock, and he actually went ahead and did it on his other show, which he writes, Doctor Who.
I was not initially keen on the Society of Apes, but I made the most elementary of errors. I fell in love.
What, with the Turkish fella?
No, not with the Turkish fellow.
Good Lord. Good Lord.
Come along, my dear. Yes, my darling.
Good Lord.
So these are the two people who came up with the idea for the show. Now, even though they're great fans, their main motivation wasn't just to have their chance at the Holmes stories. Moffat said the following himself in 2010.
This comes from a place of us being fans. This wasn't a case of, let's grab that off the shelf and update it. It was, we love this, we think everybody's been getting it wrong, and we think we can get it right. Unless you're correcting everyone else, you shouldn't be doing something. You should be saying, now this is the way it should be done.
And in the context of what I've been discussing throughout this video, there is one clear emerging idea about what they think everyone else is getting wrong and what they want to be the ones to have the chance to change. So they took their idea to the BBC just around the time the LGBT representation studies were being done, and they got the green light. They originally filmed a 60-minute pilot, and the BBC was so thrilled with it that they had them go back and rewrite it as a larger scale 90-minute series. This twist isn't just something that the writers like. Early on, Benedict Cumberbatch stated his reasons for taking the role.
The minute I started reading the script, I thought, yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. And then I met with them, and it was only after we talked about what it would be developed into, and the relationship of Watson and Holmes and where they'd go, that I thought, yeah, this could be terrific fun. I'm going to go for it.
And finally, building on that, Mark Gatiss said the following on his motivation for creating the series.
As Benedict has said, for him approaching a character that's been played over 200 times before, one of the most liberating things is that there's a big difference with this one, and so hopefully this one can be mine. I can own this one a bit more because there's a huge difference with it being in the modern day.
And when you come to the show in this context with the knowledge of all the history, that's liberating too. You can start to see everything falling into place for this huge moment of LGBT representation, because these aren't any characters. This is Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. Characters who, depending on how you read the original series, have been in the closet for well over 100 years, waiting for their truth to be told. Their coming out would have a huge impact on gay, lesbian, bi, pan, trans people everywhere, and the people making the show believe in that and want to be the ones to finally make it happen. So I hope you've enjoyed this introduction into the world of TJLC. I'd like to give a huge thank you to my friend Stacy for betaing this for me and just giving me a lot of encouragement while I worked on this idea. Feel free to check her out. I also consulted these blogs when compiling sources, so feel free to check them out too. Links to everything I've referenced can be found in the description below. I should have a video up sometime in the next few days addressing the argument that, well, the writers and actors have said it isn't going to happen, so clearly, obviously, they're telling the truth. After that, I'll be tackling the unaired pilot, known on the street as the gayest thing to be committed to film, at least before The Abominable Bride. So if you're interested in that, be sure to stick around. Until then, get ready to believe.